Hello and welcome back into In the Pocket Across the Pond, a special episode of In the Pocket Across the Pond. We're going to be going through the 2024 NFL Draft, giving you everything that you need to know, all the notable player names from all the relevant fantasy positions, wide receiver, running back, tight end, quarterback. And Alex is also going to give us his very accurate, 100% accurate actually, first round mock draft. You're going to want to pay attention to that one if you want spoilers for the actual NFL draft. But everything that you need to know going into the draft, coming into the new season, all these rookies, we're going to be going through it with you. I'm Lewis, I'm joined just by Alex today. Thank you for tuning in, enjoy. So a bit different to usual, this little episode, just the two of us. And we're not actually going to be mentioning any NFL players.
Not NFL players yet.
Not NFL players yet. All these guys we're talking about are going to be NFL players in a matter
we do a
of...
comparison, I can think of one NFL player that I'm already going to mention.
Okay.
Just by name.
Is it Chet Johnson?
Yes, it was Chet Johnson.
No, we're looking at the rookies. We're looking at the rookies today in preparation for the draft, which is later this week. Let's go positional, I think. Yeah. Let's go positional. And I'm going to go sort of in terms of, I think, what position's going to have the most relevance for your fantasy football teams this year. So we'll start with the wide receivers.
Yeah.
I'm going to go from top prospect down.
Yeah, no problem.
Marvin Harrison Jr. of Ohio State.
Yeah.
I'm hearing, hottest prospect at wide receiver since Calvin Johnson. Mm-hmm. I'm hearing people saying they haven't scouted a guy better ever, and all this sort of stuff. Obviously, hyperbole, it's rife, right about now. But Marvin Harrison Jr. is pretty legit.
Yeah. Marvin Harrison Jr. coming out of Ohio State. He does everything well. This is the main thing. He's got the size, the speed, the strength, the football IQ. Pro-level route runner already. He gives cornerbacks absolute nightmares. He's ready for the NFL. He's an absolute monster. This is why we mentioned him a few episodes ago, saying, depending on the landing spot, this is a potential guy who you can kind of plug in, lock in. I think if he goes to, let's say, somewhere where Justin Herbert's his quarterback, somewhere where Kyler Murray's his quarterback, I think you see Marvin Harrison Jr. potentially going in, second round of fantasy drafts. This is kind of how
I think first. I think first round.
You think first? I'm even being a bit hesitant.
I can't see Marvin Harrison Jr. goes to either the Chargers or the Cardinals. Yeah. I don't think he gets out with the first 10 to 12 picks.
And one of those guys who, the combine, you should really see it as kind of like a marketing tool for yourself. And I watched the combine and didn't see Marvin Harrison there because he wasn't actually there. And when you think about it, it's because he had nothing to gain from the combine. His tape's already out there. People are already absolutely enamored with him. You see most guys at the combine are guys who want to kind of double down and prove on something, maybe the third, fourth wide receiver in the class, and they want to make a case for being the, second wide receiver in the class, or the people who are thinking, I'm going to go undrafted unless I have a monster combine. People like Marvin Harrison Jr. don't need to go to the combine because the tape's already out there. They're already going to get drafted really high. There's no reason for him to go there. So if you're out there and you don't really know what's happening, but all you've heard is nothing from Harrison Jr. throughout the combine last month, it's because he didn't do it, and there was no reason.
Yeah, the combine isn't for players like.
Same with Malik Nabers, the next guy that we're going to mention. He wasn't particularly.
Yeah, let's get to. Marvin Harrison Jr. is an incredibly exciting prospect. One of these guys who, like even more highly touted than Jamar Chase, and you think of how great Jamar Chase was. I think everything that I've heard from the clips I've seen, you plug him in straight away. Yeah. Malik Nabers is next, LSU wide receiver. Tell us about him. big body sort of came out. I think, did it break out year this year?
Yeah, well, I mean, there's a good chance that Nabers is kind of like the next great LSU wide receiver coming into the NFL after Jefferson and Chase. He had a big year this year, and he's one of those guys where you're going to hear this for Nabers and the next guy that we're talking about. If it wasn't for Harrison Jr., they would be kind of the number one. Well, I mean, you look at we're projecting these first three guys to be potential top 10, top 12 picks in the draft.
Yeah.
For wide receivers, so they're going to be great. But yeah, I mean, he's wide receiver one, locked in really potential. He's got great speed and agility, especially when he's changing direction on his routes. That's where he kind of sends defenders to the shop, if you will. The only thing I will say about Nabers is I don't think his landing spots, with where he's projected to go and what those teams need, I don't think his landing spots are looking as amazing to me as Harrison Jr. I wouldn't be surprised if we see Nabers on the Giants.
Yeah, and that's a question that I was sort of going to allude to a little bit when we talk about sort of a few more of these wide receivers that are coming into the draft, because it's unfortunate really, because you have a guy like Nabers who I've heard, he would be far and away the number one wide receiver in, last year, like well above who was the first wide receiver taken last year? Was it?
I think it might have been
JSN and Quentin Johnston and Flowers. Nabers, if he was in the draft, would have been well higher than them. But it's how much is the circumstances that they get drafted into a factor for these top guys? Because Marvin Harrison Jr., Malik Nabers, we're going to talk about Odunze as well. All guys who you see as sort of like generational talent at the position, but you put Malik Nabers on the Giants and I automatically want to draft whoever the guy the Bills picked up, who might have been 5 wide receivers later in the draft. You know what I mean? I think it's incredibly important where these guys go.
But then again, there's no way that the Giants don't clearly get better if Nabers is on there.
True. Yeah.
So,
but yeah, Nabers is another one. You think he's again plug and play straight away on your fantasy team?
Yeah.
And all these guys probably are. Yeah. Odunze, Washington. Another guy, insane contested catch guy, I believe.
Probably my favourite player in the draft. I mean, you just look at any clips from him from college and he just pops off the screen. 50-50 balls turn to 80-20 balls when Odunze's going up for them. Maybe he relies on that too much. Maybe you'd want to see some downfield kind of extended speed, kind of break away from people. But then again, the reason he doesn't need to do that is because he's so good and explosive when jumping for the ball and kind of being really physical, going up and giving basically the cornerbacks absolutely no chance. And it's down to those great hands and the positioning as well. It's going to be a really good player. Really interesting, again, as we're going further down, a bit more chaos in terms of who the teams are going to be, what's going to happen in the draft. There's more as more picks come off the board, the more unpredictable the draft gets. So we don't really know where Odunze is going to go. I have a really fun landing spot for Odunze in my mock draft coming up.
Okay.
The next half of this
episode. Stay tuned for that.
Yeah.
But all 3 of these guys we just mentioned, they'll be top 10, top 12 picks in the actual NFL draft, which is crazy. Other guys who could be first round picks: Brian Thomas Jr. of LSU, Adonai Mitchell, Texas, Lad McConkey, Georgia, Troy Franklin, Oregon, and maybe Xavier Worthy, Texas. They'll just give us a little bit on those guys. Brian Thomas Jr., first off, who was Nabers' teammate at LSU.
Yeah, so I've got Brian Thomas Jr. kind of clearly above those other names that you mentioned.
Right.
He's going to be a first-round pick, whereas those other ones might not necessarily be. As you mentioned, Nabers' LSU teammate, and we're talking about another great talent, basically, looking to be drafted in a similar position to the first guys off the board last year, Jordan Addison, JSN. Versatile, really good size and speed and ability, and kind of a nose for the end zone as well. So I think any team that drafts Brian Thomas Jr. this year, no reason why he couldn't be wide receiver 1 potential.
Do you see any way in the argument that he only sort of flashed as he did this season because all the attention was on Nabers?
Well, I mean, yeah, and there's a lot of wide receivers in this class that were kind of duo wide receivers. But I mean, you're looking at the measurables, you're looking at the kind of the talent, and that's understandable for, I don't know, names when we get later on. Like, for instance, we have...
Scrolling.
For instance, we have Jalen Polk, who was Odunze's teammate at Washington. You've got a few USC wide receivers there who were having the ball thrown to them, like Brendan Rice, who were having the ball thrown to them by Caleb Williams. Basically, what I mean is there's a huge kind of crop of wide receivers this year. I think we're going to see a whole bunch of wide receivers go. There's so much depth at the position, but we're getting depth in the kind of day 2, day 3 picks in those wide receiver 2s on the college teams. But, you know, Brian Thomas Jr. is a consensus first round talent. Okay. So I'm going to trust the consensus. I'm going to trust the kind of experts at this as well and say, yes, he was the wide receiver 2 behind Malik Nabers, but no, it's not just because of Malik Nabers. If that was the case, then he'd be a really good on a day 2, day 3 pick.
Yeah. Adonai Mitchell is another name that I've heard, like, you know, really saw people get really excited about him, with people having a bit lower. As you said, we're getting into the range now where it's sort of like these guys chopping and changing, you know, end of the first, start of the second, but it's unclear were the teams have them, you know, scouted for them and stuff like that. Yeah. But Adonai Mitchell?
Yeah, I mean, huge catch radius. Huge catch radius. There's a few teams picking towards the end of the first round that you're kind of going to be salivating because they've got the chance to draft Adonai Mitchell. Great size and burst as well. He does need a bit of polish in some areas, but as I say, I mean, if he gets out of the first round unpicked and you're at the top of the draft and you've got a kind of young quarterback who's maybe not as accurate as he can be for now, give him a guy like Adonai Mitchell who can catch anything in, I don't know.
Yeah, and that's a good point. Radius. A good point. So, like, these guys, it's like the destination is more exciting, really, which is why these guys sort of burst off the page a little bit instead of sort of being in that Odunze Nabers region where it's like, they could have Daniel Jones throwing it to him. No. Yeah. What about Lad McConkey?
Yeah, I mean, the quickness is what's there with Lad McConkey out of Georgia. Really great route running ability to kind of create these open windows for a quarterback, easy completions, and some really nice top end speed to couple with that as well. But it can be kind of effective in all phases of play as a wide receiver. You know, the short game, intermediate and long. He's not just someone who can do one thing, and a good kind of punt returner as well. What I will say is there's a drill at the combine where you kind of, you know, basically, I can't remember the name of it, but they're basically running about 20, 30 yards and they're getting balls thrown at them. Left, right.
So it's like a gauntlet.
A gauntlet, that's the word that I was looking for. A gauntlet.
Like on Gladiators.
Gladiators, yeah. The gauntlet drill, essentially, when I was watching the combine, I heard the commentators say, you know, that often the kind of smoothness and quickness that a wide receiver can get through that gauntlet drill shows them kind of how maybe pro-ready they are, because it's this idea of not dwelling on or thinking about the catch. It's catch, drop. And last year, the person who did that drill the fastest was Puka Nacua. So it might be a good sign of these players who kind of like have got a really kind of accomplished skill set and are really polished and have got really good hands. And when I was watching it, McConkey was really fast through that drill. Ricky Pearsall was really fast through that drill. And so was Luke McCaffrey as well. Shout out to Luke McCaffrey.
Yeah, I mean, we'll talk about a couple of those guys in a second. I mean, that drill, I would do one better, and I just wouldn't catch him. I'm not even thinking about him at all. I just run straight through and not. Yeah.
Well, there's a great clip of a tight end, I can't remember his name, who forgot that one was coming to him, but he turned out to be an amazing, like, one-handed grab.
Nice.
Troy
Franklin, that's the second time I screwed up that name. Troy Franklin of Oregon is another player. I've heard he's very underrated. Maybe, you know, I see a lot of NFL pundits and all these people saying he's one of their favourite players in, not in the first round. And again, another one of these guys who could go to a bigger team. Do you have any thoughts on?
No, I don't know a great deal about Troy Franklin. I mean, with a lot of these wide receivers that I'm just going to mention the name of in terms of name to watch for, it's this idea of we could see NFL teams taking a shot on them because, they've got the kind of really good height and speed, and Franklin's one of them, 6'1" I've got down here. Deep threat as well. Yeah. I mean, he was playing at Oregon and he caught a lot of passes because obviously Bo Nix was at Oregon and he was kind of a completion machine. This idea that a lot of teams like Troy Franklin, it's kind of like, you want to hear that as a wide receiver, obviously.
Yeah.
But they're clearly seeing something. I mean, he's definitely not one of my top guys. I've got one other guy definitely above him just because of kind of this idea of upside. But
Xavier Worthy.
Yes.
Yeah. Obviously, the famous because now he got a lot of attention after the combine, setting the new combine record for the 40-yard dash.
Yeah, I watched that. It was crazy.
Yeah.
I mean, he's gonna have to put some body armor on.
Is this a DK Metcalf situation where the combine has upped his draft stock, or would you think he was always going to be this sort of early second round?
I mean, with Texas having as good as a season as they did this year, Worthy and Mitchell were always kind of going to turn heads, and the fact that they're different players as well. I mean, the combine thing obviously helps him. The 4.21 seconds 40-yard dash helps him. But as I said, he needs to put some body armor on. He's really skinny, so he might lack the physicality to be a dominant wide receiver, and he kind of might lack in all that the game entails as a wide receiver in that fashion, this kind of physical element of the game. But clearly his speed is absolutely elite, and anyone who's looking for a field stretcher will be in the market for him 100%.
Nice. All those guys who we mentioned are sort of the first and second round guys, I feel like. Other names of note, I feel like, obviously, after I've said these, just come back to anyone you want. Roman Wilson.
Yeah, he's a really interesting prospect out of Michigan.
Ricky Pearsall.
I think Ricky Pearsall, he's kind of my, coming out of Florida, my sleeper guy who could maybe turn into, like, a really solid kind of like, even like an Emmanuel Sanders or something.
Yeah.
Like a kind of a guy that's just really kind of solid, all-round wide receiver that ends up staying in the league forever.
Yeah.
And I could be way off base by saying that, but I like what I saw from Ricky Pearsall.
Jermaine Burton from Alabama.
Yeah.
Javon Baker. Keon Coleman.
Yeah, Keon Coleman out of Florida State. He was the number one guy there. Johnny Wilson out of Florida State as well. Two kind of Florida State guys.
Jonathon Wilson.
Yeah. I mean, Keon Coleman, he's one of the kind of top-ish. He's often mentioned in that crop that we mentioned starting.
Yeah,
with
I know he is. I agree.
He'll get contested catches because he's a big guy, but he doesn't. Not a great deal of separation.
Okay. Xavier Legette.
Xavier Legette, I believe Xavier Legette. He's coming out of South Carolina. Yeah. He's got Spencer Rattler throwing him the ball.
Brendan Rice, son of
Hall
of Fame, potentially best wide receiver ever, Jerry Rice.
Yeah.
Malachi Corley.
Yeah, I've heard a lot Debo comparisons.
Yeah.
Malachi Corley.
Coming out of Western Kentucky. Yeah. And Jalen Polk. And as you mentioned, Christian McCaffrey's brother, what was his name?
Luke McCaffrey.
Now, I think there's something to be said about these guys, because I'm just interested in Luke McCaffrey, because there's got to be something in the DNA. There is something to be said about guys whose siblings, whose fathers played in the league and have taught them things that they've learned from actually playing in the league. Marvin Harrison Jr., his father very well-known NFL player. Brendan Rice, obviously. Luke McCaffrey. I don't know, there's just something about those guys where it's like, maybe there's something there. The intangibles might not be as sort of highly thought of as all these other guys, but, you know.
Do you want to know what I bet? I bet you Luke McCaffrey gets drafted, and I bet you Brendan Rice doesn't.
Really?
I'm just saying.
Okay.
Devontae Walker out of North Carolina as well is a player maybe to look out for.
Yeah.
We mentioned Johnny Wilson, Jamari Thrasher of Louisville.
Jamari Thrasher?
Jalen McMillan, another Washington wide receiver, just shows you kind of like the amount of weapons that Penix was throwing it to. Malik Washington, Virginia, I think, is a bit of a sleeper, as is Taj Washington out of USC. As well as Brendan Rice.
So all those names, remember them. I feel like I'm hearing this is like a generational year for wide receivers. You don't always get this sort of year. It feels quite different that we're mentioning all these guys, because every year when you're doing your fantasy drafts, it's like you're not looking for this many rookie wide receivers when you're doing your drafts, are you? Yeah. But this just does feel like one of those reset years at the position where you have so many guys coming in, which is, as we said in our previous episodes about free agency, that's why you're having a nightmare if you're a wide receiver wanting big money this year, because look at these guys coming in. But yeah, I mean, so much of this depends on where they land. Like, you might see some of these guys who we've been speaking about quite middlingly be bolted up the rankings if you're saying they're drafted by the Bills or something like that.
Exactly.
Yeah. But let's move on to the running backs, shall we? Interesting one. No real first round talents. I guess you should say about the running backs.
There's a lot of depth, and I think a lot of running backs will be taken. But no, not any first round talent. And what I will say is, as a class as a whole, I think I've heard the ball security issues with a lot of these guys. Fewer of them than you like are kind of like adept at catching the ball, which is why this first name is where he is.
Yeah, so first up is Jonathon Brooks of Texas, coming off a bad injury though. Yeah. But he is sort of, from a lot of sources that I looked at, the consensus probably number one running back who still will be a day two pick.
Yeah, I mean, he was playing, obviously, for a lot of his Texas career behind a couple of really good running backs in, obviously, Bijan. And, who's our man who went to the Bears last year?
Rashawn Johnson.
Jonathon Brooks, bad ACL injury that he did kind of, I believe he saw either a surgeon or a doctor from the Cowboys.
Yeah, Cowboys.
So he's kind of been around the facility a lot. Dynamic, all-purpose kind of guy who hasn't played much in college as well, so some tread on the tyres, some fresh legs.
Right. And then after Jonathon Brooks, a lot of names who just sort of get meshed together, and you again, not that much consistency in the way these guys are ranked. Jalen Wright out of Tennessee, Blake Corum out of Michigan, Trey Benson, Florida State, Marshawn Lloyd, USC, Braylon Allen, Wisconsin. They're sort of the six names, as well as Jonathon Brooks. They're the six names that I'm hearing who are guys who are probably going to be the highest touted running backs.
Yeah, I mean, Blake Corum is a name that people might have heard of because he was obviously on Michigan, national champion. He's a grinder. He's got nice feet and good hands as well, and it's the toughness and patience between tackles which was really a standout, and that ability to get in the end zone. I think I've mentioned in the past that I don't know how amazing he might be as like an NFL player. Maybe, I don't know, maybe he's going to be the next Derrick Henry, or maybe the comp to kind of someone like Tyler Algier is more kind of apt. But I mean, Blake Corum's certainly one of the higher kind of touted guys because of that national championship, because he's been really good at Michigan for a few years. Trey Benson from Florida State, loads of big playability in large part because of his speed. Bucky Irving from Oregon's kind of a bit of a wild card. He's pretty shifty.
Yeah.
Smaller guy, definitely plays above his weight. Didn't have a great combine though, but could be kind of develop into a reliable guy on a team. Audric Estime out of Notre Dame, more of a power guy than a speed guy. And I like Ray Davis out of Kentucky. I think, he's shifty. He's been really productive in college as well. I think Ray Davis might be a name to look out for. You mentioned Jalen Wright. Braylon Allen as well, really young, big-bodied guy, could develop into something. Will Shipley at Clemson's pretty versatile. Marshawn Lloyd is interesting. He's got pro potential.
Yeah, I'm hearing stuff about Marshawn Lloyd. Good stuff, just saying that,
dangerous in the open field.
And saying that maybe this past year didn't look as great because there was such issues with the offensive line at USC, where Caleb Williams was, that it was all just sort of forced on the shoulders of Williams, and Lloyd didn't have much to do. If you look at actually the season before, his stats were a lot more flattering. So he could be one to look out for, really. Yeah.
I mean, Cody Schrader at Missouri as well, I just want to give him a mention because he might not even get drafted, but he was 2023 All-American, which is basically like first-team All-Pro for college.
Yeah.
You know, you don't get that without having something about your game. And Isaac Garendo out of Louisville is going to be a bit of a sleeper. He's super fast. He's kind of like having Metcalf at running back.
Nice.
If you look at this guy,
Frank Gore Jr.
I've not got him on my board now.
Son of Frank Gore, would you believe? I mean, I'm interested in, as I said, Marshawn Lloyd and Blake Corum, just because we know the identity.
Garendo ran a 4.33 by the way, which you know,
madness.
Quick.
Blake Corum out of Michigan, just because of the success of that team and how we know that team wants to play by churning, you know, those yards out on the ground. I mean, obviously you could see that as like he's got a lot of wear on the tyres, but you could also see it as that he's been in this NFL style offense with Jim Harbaugh, so he knows how that works. He obviously is a good enough running back, good enough capability to implement that type of offense. I don't know. I'm just interested, but I think
and the thing about Corum is obviously depending on how the draft falls, and I assume the Chargers' pick is at the start of the third round because of what they're picking at the start of the first round. They could
probably will get him.
They could get him at the start of the third round. You know what I mean?
To go with the other Ravens running backs that they've got.
Yeah, I'm sure Harbaugh would love.
Yeah, but I think because there's no real guys here, you know, we spoke about Nabers being sort of a guy who can maybe elevate, if he goes to the Giants, he'll be able to elevate them. I don't think any of these guys are guys who are going to elevate a team. This all depends on where they end up, I guess. You know, we know the Cowboys are looking for running backs. We know Chargers again, Raiders potentially. You know, these teams. It sort of depends on where they land. Like if Bucky Irving lands on the Ravens, who are sort of lacking a bit of depth at that position outside of obviously Derrick Henry, it's like, oh well, I don't really want to touch him. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And you don't really have any guys who can necessarily transcend that, I guess. But some interesting names nonetheless there. Tight end.
I've got notes on one guy.
One guy, there's another guy who I've sort of heard is the next best prospect by a clear margin.
Is it Jatavian Sanders?
It's Jatavian Sanders. But other than him, I mean, and even Jatavian Sanders is sort of looking like a, you know, day two pick, really.
Yeah.
It's Brock Bowers out of Georgia.
Yeah, Brock Bowers probably going to be a top 10 pick. Speedy, really good hands, lots of power and toughness. Could be a great weapon for a team for years.
I know, and you feel like you hear this about someone every year, but again, I mean, Brock Bowers is like
out of Georgia
is like the most accomplished tight end prospect ever.
Yeah,
you know.
I mean, you've got later on Cade Stover out of Ohio State, Ben Sinnott, Theo Johnson, Jaheim Ball, who might not get drafted, but the kind of tight ends. Maybe worth noting the names, but it's Brock Bowers really, and he's going to go really high in the draft.
Yeah, and obviously see where he lands, but we've seen what rookie tight ends can do after last year. So, I mean, give me some rookie tight end.
I mean, Brock Bowers is probably, he's ranked really highly, but he's probably the only tight end ranked on any kind of consensus big board in terms of the best prospects.
I've seen him like a pick 6 on the big board. Like,
I mean, there's
saying he's like the 6th best player in the draft.
Yeah. I mean, putting this in kind of like context, there's no running backs really in consensus big boards in the top 60.
No.
Yeah.
But that's the Titans. And then the quarterbacks, you might be wondering why we've left the quarterbacks to last. Now, I've left the quarterbacks to last because obviously the most notable position on the field, probably. But in terms of fantasy football, very rarely relevant in the rookie seasons. So all these names are ones that you've heard everybody talking about all off season. But then again, it's like, are we going to want to actually start these guys?
Yeah.
Caleb Williams, obviously, we assume he's going to the Bears.
He's going to go first overall. His consensus number one, generational talent, kind of extending play, extraordinaire, every angle under the sun with his arm.
Yeah.
Leader, Aaron Rodgers, Pat Mahomes, had a baby. Caleb Williams. This is what people are going to be telling you. He's going to go one overall. He's probably going to be a really good player.
I suppose the more pressing question for this podcast is, though, would you draft him and play him in fantasy football? And if so,
maybe, yeah. At the Bears, they've probably got enough
is
talent
he is he like a draft and see? Because I don't. If you're in a savvy league, I don't think this is a case of like you're going to have to grab Caleb Williams as your number one quarterback because of someone else. He's going to be a guy you can pick up and put on your bench and see what happens. I'm sure. I would highly doubt that he's drafted as people's number one quarterback and they're reaching for him.
No, it's weird because it's not like he's the best prospect since Lawrence, who was the best prospect since Luck, he's such a different quarterback to Trevor Lawrence and Andrew Luck, so you don't know really what he could be. Obviously, we saw last year with CJ Stroud that the fantasy ceiling's there. But I don't know. I definitely draft him. He's definitely going to get drafted. Because players with really big real-life hype get drafted in fantasy.
Yeah. It's just draft and see, I guess.
Yeah.
Jayden Daniels we'll talk about next, LSU. What do you reckon about Jayden Daniels?
The tape from the past year just pops off
Heisman
the screen.
winner.
Wow. 40 touchdown throws, just 4 interceptions, 10 touchdowns on the ground with over 1,000 yards rushing. Not just an elite rusher, but a solid passer from the pocket too. Very slight frame, though. Got a weird elbow thing as well.
Elbow thing.
Are you going to see those pictures?
No. Get it up. We're pulling up the pictures, and I'm going to live react to them.
This has to be
Jayden Daniels'
somewhere.
elbow. What is going on? No, what?
I think that's doctored.
That looks like
that
looks
looks
like an
round.
AI image.
It's really like this, but it's clearly at some weird angle. But that's strange, isn't it? It looks painful.
So it looks like he's an action figure, and he's got like removable sections of his body, and like it looks like he's just clipped his forearm into his elbow.
I mean, one of the quarterbacks of many in this draft class that have kind of shown some real resiliency in the college career, in a sense, came out of nowhere to completely light college football on fire last year, even though LSU didn't really do much. It's not like a Joe Burrow sense where LSU won the national championship. But, the tape and the stats speak for themselves. So last year, I think the upside is astronomical if you just look at what he did last year for Jayden Daniels.
Okay.
Yeah.
Drake Maye,
out
of North Carolina. I feel like Drake Maye, we might have alluded to it on a previous podcast, but he's sort of... He's sort of been the faller in all of this. Like he's been falling down draft boards.
His size and arm talent make it easy to compare him to Justin Herbert. Bit of a gunslinger as well, but that comes with some real inconsistencies. Like in games, the highs are high, but the lows could potentially be really low. And as you say, I think he's been a sufferer of this kind of, especially this JJ McCarthy hype. I think. Drake Maye has been a sufferer of that. I don't realistically expect it to mean Drake Maye isn't one of the top 3 picks in the entire draft, though.
Okay.
Yeah.
JJ McCarthy, maybe the biggest riser because Jim Harbaugh should just trade away Justin Herbert and draft him by what he's been saying. But JJ McCarthy, Michigan quarterback, Michigan obviously won the national championship with JJ McCarthy as the quarterback. What do you reckon?
Now, he's got a real ability to kind of zip the ball in between defenders. He's moldable. He's mobile, good leader. Doesn't have any standout measurables though. He's got. I think the hype's got out of control. He doesn't make off-schedule plays, really. And some people will argue, oh, well, he didn't get asked to do any of this stuff. All this stuff that we're projecting that he's going to be amazing at, we didn't see it in college because he didn't get asked to do it. It's like, okay, but that makes no sense to me. It's like, on the one hand, with someone like a JJ McCarthy, it's this idea that, oh, he didn't get asked to do it. That means that doesn't mean he can't do it.
Yeah.
We're going to assume that he can do it because he's really young. Oh, Bo Nix is 4 or 5 years older than McCarthy, though, and he didn't do all these things in college either, so we're going to assume he can't do them. But McCarthy, I don't know. I think it's really risky assuming a guy can do things.
Yeah.
And McCarthy, he might well be an amazing player at the NFL level, but the fact of the matter is he was more of a game manager in college behind a really good defense and a really good run game of Michigan, and he did exactly what he needed to do, which in a sense is amazing in itself. But I don't know why we're projecting that this guy could just be this unbelievable blank ball of clay that anyone can mould and he can do all this stuff. We didn't see it.
Yeah.
We didn't see it. So how can you project that he can do these things?
Yeah, true.
I don't know.
To me, I get Zach Wilson vibes.
yeah.
Just he looks like him.
Maybe hot take, but I think Zach Wilson had more kind of like on-screen, on-tape talent coming out of college than McCarthy did.
Okay. Yeah. I think those sort of 4 guys are the ones that you're gonna see in the top 10. Yeah. Next 2 could go first round though. Michael Penix Jr. At Washington.
Michael Penix Jr. Big time arm, deep ball accuracy, multiple season-ending injuries throughout his career. Lots of people say he's got buzz potential. His pro day did wonders for him because there was this idea that he's really slow and not so mobile. Well, he ran and jumped and performed pretty well at his pro day, and if you saw any of the throws that he made at the combine, it's just silk. He's one of those left-handed throwers. It was a real pass-heavy offense in Washington, and he just threw bombs down the field all the time. Heisman runner-up, national champion runner-up as well, unfortunately.
Right.
Penix, older prospect, serious talent though.
So maybe a bit of a project, maybe. So
no, I mean.
Or do you? I think the expectation is those first. I don't know. Those first 4 guys, maybe they get drafted, they'll start right away. Whereas maybe Michael Penix, is he a start right away sort of guy?
It's weird because Penix is, and I don't know how to explain like Penix's talent and what he can do, other than saying like he could go somewhere like the Giants and just have too much on his play and be a complete bust. But I could see, if you put Michael Penix on the Miami Dolphins right now, he could probably put 40 or 50 points up on a team.
Okay.
Like he could probably throw 5 or 6 touchdowns in a game, like with players like the Dolphins have. Yeah. He's got that kind of talent.
Okay.
It's weird. It's weird. This is why a lot of people are saying he's got bust potential, because it's kind of like he's just. It depends on the situation, but I'm really excited. I mean, he's a really fun player to watch.
And Bo Nix out of Oregon.
Yeah, speaking of not fun players to watch, though, I mean, super safe.
So you're telling me he's going to the Broncos?
I mean, we'll discuss that in my mock draft.
Right.
But, I mean, super safe, experienced college quarterback, played a lot of college football, really accurate, really safe, could probably be really good in like in a structured offense that already has some really good pieces and a really good defense as well. Doesn't really excite you, but to say he's not a good quarterback would be a lie. Yeah. He's just maybe not as flashy as the other guys. It's weird, him and Penix, because they're like kind of grouped together, even though to me they're like the opposite player.
Yeah.
Yeah, but both kind of older prospects as well.
Depends where they'll be drafted, but
I seriously think the age thing between Nix and McCarthy is the only factor as to why they're not being like drafted back to back.
Got you, yeah. But Penix, Nix, maybe not being drafted in fantasy football.
Yeah,
but they're the sort of first round guys.
Yeah.
Second round, Spencer Rattler. Yeah. South Carolina. I remember years ago on like Instagram on these, NFL pages and stuff, seeing videos of him in high school, and everyone's like, "Look at this guy."
I think he was on a show.
Yeah.
Former 5-star recruit.
That's it, 5-star recruit.
Got humbled at Oklahoma and ended up being benched for Caleb Williams, who of course ended up leaving Oklahoma. Matured at South Carolina. And some people think that he could be nailed on for one of these teams that doesn't maybe want to draft a Bo Nix and Michael Penix super high, but needs a quarterback, a kind of reliable quarterback who is kind of flashy as well. Personally, I think Spencer Rattler has Denver written all over him.
Oh, really?
All over him, yeah.
I remember getting confused between Spencer Rattler and Desmond Ridder.
Yeah.
Similar last names. That is the only reason.
I think Spencer Rattler will be better than Desmond Ridder. Potential's there, like you're not a 5-star recruit coming out of high school for no reason. And like I said, he needed to be humbled, really.
And Michael Pratt,
out of Tulane. Don't have many notes on Michael Pratt. I've kind of got in groups with Jordan Travis from Florida State, another kind of quarterback that showed real resilience. Florida State, what happened to them this year, not being picked for the playoffs was pretty crazy, but Jordan Travis did have quite a bad injury. Also, Sam Hartman at Notre Dame, amazing hair.
Notre Dame fighting Irish. That guy looks 40 years old.
Amazing hair.
Incredible hair.
Incredible face.
He looks like...
he looks like he should be a poster boy for the NFL.
If you put them all together and you didn't know who they were and what their names were, all these quarterbacks, and you said, guess who's the number one pick, I'd pick him.
Yeah, I mean, he
looks the archetype, doesn't he?
He looks the part, and again, really good kind of college career. Maybe just not got the measurables to...
and he's ancient now, isn't he?
He's ancient, but I think people you're rooting for him to kind of do a kind of Gardner Minshew, be a kind of get a career backup kind of thing. And Joe Milton as well.
Yes.
Out of Tennessee, absolute cannon of an arm. You should Google, if you're listening to this, YouTube the clips of him throwing at the combine. It is insane. It kind of he'll get the ball and then he'll just wait there for a few seconds and then just launch it 75, 80 yards. It is crazy, this guy's arm.
Yeah.
And some kind of rushing ability too, Joe Milton. He's kind of maybe like I don't know, a poor man's Jalen Hurts. Okay. Nowhere near as talented as Jalen Hurts, of course. Nowhere near the college kind of accolades in the college tape. But if we're just kind of talking about the raw talent and what he's good at, he's never going to be Jalen Hurts. But, he just seeing him running with the ball, seeing kind of the size of the guy as well, the arm talent. Jalen Hurts would probably be the absolute ceiling for someone like Joe Milton if he even gets an opportunity.
Yeah, of course.
Yeah.
And Austin Reed out of Western Kentucky.
Yeah. You've also got
noble name.
Taulia Tagovailoa out of Maryland, who completely we can't swear, can we?
No.
Pooed the bed. In his pro day,
he did.
Yeah. His arm just looked weak.
To his brother.
Yeah, his arm just out of Maryland. His arm just looked weak. The ball was dying. If he had a chance of being drafted or kind of being an undrafted free agent, which he might still do at Miami, but unfortunately for him, not a great pro day.
Yeah, I think fantasy football wise, I think your most relevant guys, obviously TBC to where they're drafted, but right now looking at them, I would say the most likely guys of you drafting them and you end up starting them at some point in the season is Caleb Williams and Jayden Daniels.
And potentially Maye if you're looking at that kind of Herbert.
Okay.
And Penix if he gets drafted by Miami and if Tua kind of goes down with injury.
Right, okay. But yeah, sort of those guys.
Yeah.
But let's get into your mock draft.
Mock draft 1.0.
Mock draft 1.0.
Not that there's going to be another.
I'm going to say, that implies that you're going to do several more.
As we've mentioned, stacked draft at wide receiver and offensive line, a lot of talent. As well, quarterback, of course, as well. Now, with this mock draft, I've tried to do it as realistic as possible. I wanted to put a few bold calls in there to kind of stamp my own stamp myself Incorrect thoughts. It's one of those where it's if I get 6, 7 of these right in real life, that would be amazing. Because if you think about
no one ever does that.
I know. If I could get 5 or 6 right, I don't know, because the number one is a gimme. Plus, also, you just don't know because trades could happen. One player going to one team completely messes up 2 picks on your mock draft. So it never happens. So if 5 of these come off, I'll be happy. But, you know, I've tried to do it realistic in terms of looking at teams' needs and being realistic and not being sensational. And on the odd occasion, I might have put someone in there which I think is fun, or I might have put someone in there where the team takes the best player possible, because just how I've got some of these picks going, some players have fallen, were probably later than they're going to go in real life. And that's why they might go to a team who just thinks he's the best player possible. Yeah. We're just going to pick him. Anyway, number 1, Chicago Bears pick Caleb Williams, quarterback at USC. It's a no-brainer. Number 2, the Washington Commanders pick Jayden Daniels, quarterback out of LSU. I did hear chat like this past week about him being not being interested in going to the Commanders anymore, especially since they did that weird thing where they invited Daniels, Maye, McCarthy, and Penix all kind of together to an interview, which was weird. But I do think he's the guy to go with here. New England, Drake Maye. Okay. Quarterback, North Carolina. Still not 100% convinced that the kind of the McCarthy hype doesn't push him all the way up here. Plus, this idea of New England, history repeating itself, drafting a Michigan quarterback. Yeah. No, I'm going with Maye. I think this is still fairly predictable at the minute. Then...
Yes.
First trade.
The first trade?
I think the Minnesota Vikings trade up to the 4th spot.
No!
With the Cardinals.
No, I don't want this to happen.
I think the Cardinals trade out of that spot, and I think the Vikings are enamoured with JJ McCarthy. They think he's kind of some kind of, as I mentioned before, kind of blank ball of clay for O'Connell to mould, who can also sit behind Darnold for a little bit. What do you think of that, Lou? You don't like it?
Sitting behind Sam Darnold?
Just the idea of the Vikings trading up and getting McCarthy.
I know, nothing to do with the Vikings. I just really want to see Marvin Harrison on the Cardinals. Me too. And that won't happen if they trade down.
Me too, but then I've got the Chargers at 5 taking Marvin Harrison Jr., who's the best player available, which you don't see.
I don't see, just because of how Jim Harbaugh runs his offense and the moves that they have made. Mm-hmm. They've established that we are a run-first team. All the acquisitions we've made are running backs. We've got rid of everyone who can catch the ball, which is subsequently why Quentin Johnson is still on the team. Yeah. Everything that Harbaugh is, hiring Greg Roman, it says that they're going to be a run-first team. So why the hell would you want Marvin Harrison Jr.?
Because they have
got Justin Herbert, but it keeps getting ingrained into me by people that Harbaugh's a run first, Justin Herbert's going to be tanked, So it'll just be insane mixed messages if they get Marvin Harrison Jr.
I agree.
I feel like if they do this, I have to go with the actual physical evidence rather than what people are saying. Okay. There's no way that you could say all you want that Jim Harbaugh is a run-first coach. If they have Justin Herbert and get Marvin Harrison Jr., I'm not believing that for 1 second. But
and of all the picks in this draft, this is the one that I don't like looking at the most. I don't like how it feels. Like you, I'm not convinced that this is what the Chargers are going to do, even though it will be the right thing to do. If there's any
team to trade out, it will be the Chargers.
Yeah, I just think the Cardinals want to rack up picks. I mean, what I will say is right now, the first round that I have the Cardinals having here is kind of like best case scenario for them. I think I've got them having a great first round here. Okay. I think they want to trade out of that spot. Anyway, 6, the Giants. I've got them picking Malik Nabers, wide receiver LSU.
What are you doing?
They've not got the balls to get rid of Daniel Jones. So why not go and get him the second best weapon in the draft?
Yeah.
No, I think aside from number 1, Caleb Williams, this is the most nailed-on pick. Tennessee Titans at 7 pick Joe Alt, offensive tackle.
Fighting Irish himself.
Yeah, best O-lineman in the draft goes to a team very much in need at that position.
Yeah.
The Falcons, that leaves them with Dallas Turner, edge rusher out of Alabama, arguably the best defensive player in the draft. The Falcons grab him, which will be great. Now, here is kind of my stamp Because I think...
I'm reading it now, this is bold.
Because I think... this is my bold call, because I think it's realistic that the Cardinals or the Chargers do trade out of that position with the Vikings. I've got this number 9 spot that was the Chicago Bears. I've got them trading out of it. And it's the Raiders that trade them. The Raiders have got enough draft capital this year to kind of move up in the draft. I believe that they've already kind of shown willingness to, and they've been given the all clear to kind of look to move up in the draft. Yeah. The Chicago Bears only have 4 picks in the entire draft. I think they need to get more picks rather than this idea of them drafting Rome Odunze here. Why have DJ Moore? Why go out and get Keenan Allen if you're also going to spend a pick here on Rome Odunze when you could trade out of it and get more draft picks in this draft? I also think that the Raiders are kind of the really scared of the Broncos kind of picking above them at 12 because the Raiders would be at 13, and they don't want someone like the Seahawks, for instance, to jump them into the top 10. So that's why I've got the Raiders making this bold move to trade up to 9 and draft Michael Penix Jr.
Okay.
At 9, that's my bold call.
Michael Penix.
That's my. But I don't think you draft up there and pick Bo Nix. I think you draft up there and you swing for the fences. Is that the term, swing for the fences?
Yes. And, and they've got... Yeah. There's no pressure that way for Penix to start right away because I am in full belief that that Minshew is going to be their quarterback all season this year because Minshew's a decent quarterback. So
I just think they swing for the fences and they get Penix here.
I agree. My only question is, the Bears might want to get Odunze to sort of pair him to pair Caleb Williams with another rookie, essentially, and have a guy who can grow with him and they can grow together, and then ultimately have to let Odunze go because they need to pay both of them in however many years.
Yeah. I just think the right thing to do for the Bears is to trade out of this and get some more draft picks. And like I said, Raiders being scared with the Broncos and the Seahawks, I think they get in here. 10, the Jets. No, they don't pick Rome Odunze. Let's not be silly here, New York Jets. You're picking Olu Fashanu, offensive tackle from Penn State. Don't go out and get a wide receiver because remember what happened last year? Your quarterback played full snaps. You need offensive line help. Joe Alt's already gone. This is the best guy left. This is the next guy up, I should say. There's a lot of really good guys left on the offensive line. I mean, there's no point having all these amazing weapons if your quarterback isn't on the field. Yeah. So go and get a really premier offensive lineman. Cardinals at 11 because of the trade with the Vikings. It
has to be Odunze.
It's not. It's Jared Verse.
What?
Jared Verse, second best edge rusher in the draft. They really need help at edge rusher. This is the start of the Cardinals draft haul because I'm the betting on a guy being left later on.
Okay, right.
Denver Broncos. I've got them selecting the premier cornerback of the draft.
Oh.
Quinion Mitchell out of Toledo. Yeah. So tempting to have them reach for Bo Nix here. But as I said, I think they draft Spencer Rattler in the second. They need a cornerback desperately. Mitchell is the best on the board. Bears, second bite of the cherry with Rome Odunze. But they've got picks later in the draft from the Raiders. So I've got them getting Leatu Latu. Okay. Edge rusher out of UCLA. Again, don't buy them taking a wide receiver in the first round. They need help at edge rusher. Leatu Latu's got a really great story coming back from a serious neck injury to be a great college player with so much potential. If you kind of see people talking about these players, particularly defensive players, Leatu Latu's got a huge ceiling.
Yeah.
The Saints at 14. I've got them taking Brock Bowers. Got them taking Brock Bowers because he's not necessarily tight end's not necessarily a need for the Saints, but he's the best player available.
He isn't, but that would be grim.
It would be grim
because it's like, of course, the 1 year you've got a tight end that you can plug in and start, and he's on the same team as that absolute annoying. As bloody
Sharples' his best mate Taysom Hill. See, my thinking is the Cardinals taking Jared Verse at 11 because of course Odunze was there, but they need an edge rusher, and we've got the Bears later on.
Yeah.
that need an edge rusher. The Broncos could definitely take someone on the edge, as could the Saints. So it's about taking guys where they are. It's about looking at your needs and looking at other teams' needs and playing a bit of a game of chess. That's why some people fall, and that's why, unfortunately, these next two players who... I would be super surprised if in real life Brock Bowers falls to 14 and this next player falls to 15. However, judging by that's how it fell to me. Judging by the chess game of the draft and what teams need, and he's not going to be there. Well, we need this. Well, this is more valuable to us than that. So at 15, I've got the Colts taking Rome Odunze. And this is, I mentioned this to you. I couldn't believe, I didn't mean my mock draft to work out like this. It just did, because before I did this mock draft, I already said to Lou a couple of weeks ago that I think it would be amazing if Odunze ended up at the Colts. And my mock draft just ended up that way. Just think about that absolute cannon that Anthony Richardson has got, throwing it up to someone like Odunze. I'd love this landing spot.
Nice.
I would love this landing spot. I don't think it's going to happen, but I would love it. The Seahawks, I think they would take Penix if he was here at 16. You know, they've got the offensive coordinator who was at Washington. But they go to Talesi Fuaga, offensive tackle, Oregon State. It's a boring one, as I said. Not a flashy pick, but they need a guard. And Fuaga, even though he's a tackle, he can play across the offensive line. He's pretty versatile there. Jaguars addressing a position of need. They got Terrion Arnold.
Yes.
Cornerback out of Alabama. Cincinnati Bengals, I really like this. I think this is exciting. They picked Byron Murphy II, defensive tackle out of Texas. Really great combine. And I think they steal him from the Rams, who are picking after him, because I think they would have picked Byron Murphy if he was left there. Instead, they get the defensive lineman Jazan Newton out of Illinois. Obviously, they need defensive tackles, seeing as they just had a pretty big retirement, Lou. I don't know if you heard.
The Rams?
Yeah.
Yes, they did.
Steelers at 20. I've got the Steelers addressing some offensive line help that they need, and they're picking Amarius Mims out of Georgia, which would be a nice pick for them here at 20. Dolphins maybe reaching slightly to get an inside offensive lineman, Jackson Powers Johnson. But it's what they need. They kind of need a guy that can play on the inside. There's another guy that can play on the inside, but he's more of a tackle. Not that I'm an expert on offensive line, but I think kind of Powers Johnson is maybe a more prototypical inside offensive lineman than a guy that I've got the Cowboys taking in a few picks. So Powers Johnson to the Dolphins to kind of shore up that offensive line. Eagles, Cooper DeJean. Cornerback out of Iowa.
Dijon. I don't know.
Cornerback out of Iowa. Then we've got the Cardinals with the second. Well, this will be the second part of the big old haul.
Yeah.
In the first round, Brian Thomas Jr. Okay. Wide receiver LSU. I think this might be the best case scenario for the Cardinals. That kind of idea of them having loads of picks in the first round. And getting a really good wide receiver for Kyler Murray. Okay. I like Brian Thomas Jr. here, I'll be honest with you.
And see, for example, if that were to happen, that's a prime example of what I'm saying, like, you know, Nabers, Odunze would be, are obviously greater prospects than Thomas. But for me, that puts Brian Thomas Jr., if he were to go to the Cardinals, he would clearly be the second rookie wide receiver that I would be drafting after Marvin Harrison. You know what I mean? That's how important something like that could be.
Yeah. I think this would be really good for the Cardinals, though. I've got the Cowboys taking Troy Foanu. I'm awful at pronunciations. A kind of pretty versatile guy on the O-line. You know, obviously the Cowboys really need a left tackle, but this guy can play. He's got a lot of talent. He's got a lot of potential out of Washington, and he can play kind of all over that offensive line.
Okay.
So it can kind of be moulded into what the Cowboys need, and I do see them using this first pick on an offensive.
They've got it from what they've.
Same with the Packers. I've got them taking J.C. Latham out of Alabama. Maybe the last really good offensive tackle before slight talent drop-off at the position. But as you see, and maybe it's this idea that, okay, so Powers Johnson, who the Dolphins took, maybe kind of not as good offensive tackle as you will prospect as someone like Latham or who the Packers just took, but he's more of a prototypical inside guy, so that's what the Dolphins need. Cowboys need someone that's not necessarily a left tackle, a strict left tackle, so Troy Fauanu is someone who's a bit more versatile, who could play there, whereas Latham's just a really good offensive tackle who can kind of slot in with the Packers. So I'm trying to go with what the team needs and what the players can do. Tampa Bay 26, I've got them taking Chop Robinson. Edge rusher from Penn State. Yeah.
Chop.
Yeah. Edge rusher from Penn State. Should be a nice pick. And then the Cardinals at 27, they've got a pick. This is from Houston, from the another year. Finishing off this first round haul with Nate Wiggins, cornerback, Clemson. Best case scenario, round one for the Cardinals sees them addressing 3 major issues. Edge rusher, cornerback, and wide receiver.
Okay.
I think that will be great. Now we're getting into some pretty fun picks, I have to say. We're getting into some pretty fun picks. The Buffalo Bills at 28. I've got them taking Adonai Mitchell, wide receiver, Texas, who we mentioned before.
Yeah.
I think it will be a great play to see at the Chiefs, but I do think the Bills kind of get Adonai Mitchell, he looks like a wide receiver 1.
Yeah.
Plays like a wide receiver 1. I think they grab him here. They need to grab a wide receiver. And that leaves the Detroit Lions, since the release of Cam Sutton, they've got a vital need at cornerback. So I've got them taking Kool-Aid McKinstry.
Shut up with that.
Now maybe
Kool-Aid McKinstry.
Yeah. Now maybe first round, I don't know if Kool-Aid's seen as a first round talent, but he's probably the best cornerback left on the board.
He should be, with that name.
I just don't think he's got like blistering speed. He's the best cornerback left on the board out of Alabama, and is a real need for the Lions now. Obviously, Cam Sutton was released, and it would be great. Kool-Aid at the Lions. That would be great. Ravens, Tyler Guyton, offensive tackle from Oklahoma. San Francisco, here we go. The last 2 picks of the round. San Francisco, I like this one a lot. I've got them taking wide receiver Lad McConkey out of Georgia. They've got bigger needs, particularly on the O-line, but McConkey, big board wise, he's probably a better prospect than any kind of offensive tackle still on the board. I'd just love to see what Shanahan and Purdy could do with someone like McConkey, this weapon, especially if they don't get anything done with Ayuk, but I think he'd be maybe prolific at someone like 49ers. I think that would be great. And 32 running out the round, I've got I hate this. Yeah. I hate this so much. Yeah. I don't want to be sensationalist, but I've got the Chiefs taking Xavier Worthy, the speed guy from Texas. Yeah. Still not in love with it. And I don't want it to be like, the drafting a speed guy is going to be the next Tyreek Hill, but it's a different wide receiver to Rashee Rice, who you expect he's going to play at some point this year. We don't know
we don't
know what's going to happen there. But he fits the Chiefs. He can open the lid off, you know what I mean? Yeah. He can take the lid off. And I just think that this idea of like this field stretcher for the Chiefs, don't want it to be like a similar situation as going down as when they drafted Clyde the other year, and it kind of lines up on paper, but on the field it doesn't. But that's what I've got.
Okay. Interesting. Make notes of all them, see how many are wrong.
Yeah.
All right. In the draft later on this week, very exciting. I think it's really exciting because, as you've shown in your mock draft, so many notable offensive players, notable fantasy football pieces this year in the draft. You're going to want to pay attention to it, really. And that's what we've got today. Just giving you a round out of the draft, making you familiar with some of the names. Hopefully, you can get excited for where they get drafted, unless they get drafted to the Giants. Mm-hmm. We will be back analysing these picks in our next episode.
I'm going to try and kind of highlight how many were right, how many were wrong. We set the bar. Should we set it at 6?
I think 6 is insane.
6 will be 6 is insane, but 1, Caleb Williams is nailed on. 7, Joe Walton to the Titans is pretty much nailed on. I would also go as far to say Dallas Turner to the Falcons is nailed
Okay,
on.
I just think the volatility of if one of these guys doesn't, that it's like a domino effect, isn't it? But if you want to go 6,
No, five.
no, you said 6.
5 because
Okay.
because
You've already got 3 of them apparently.
I know, well, because I probably screwed up everything I just said about those offensive line guys. I was trying to make it work.
Yeah.
We'll see.
Okay. We will be back with you when we're breaking down everything in the draft. But until then, enjoy the draft.
Enjoy.
Thank you for listening.
Yes, thank you.
We'll be back with Alex Sharples next time.
Bet
We
you've missed
know
that guy.
I bet you've missed him a lot this episode. Thank you for listening.
Thank you.
Goodbye.
See you.